Hello and welcome to Cloud Insiders, a podcast that brings cloud down to earth. Hello and welcome to this episode of Cloud Insiders. This episode we're looking to unearth the things that people may not consider before an automation project. What automates the automation? Today I'm joined by Davey and Sam Perrin, esteemed members of the Xtravirt cloud automation practice. Sam, you look vaguely familiar. Have I seen you somewhere before?
Well, some of you may know me as the host of Cloud Insiders. But no more. I've been removed and now I have to attend as a guest. So
removed is such a strong word. I believe someone's workload became a little bit too busy for us.
I used to host, I helped you host the Cloud Insiders podcast, but now I'm lucky enough to be a guest, so it's good.
Oh, thank you for using the word lucky. So, as I mentioned, my name is Stuart Robinson. I'll be your host for today on this discussion, Lifting the Veil on Automation. If you can keep laughter to a minimum. Right, we've done an episode before about VRA and VRO entitled Ruv Room. So have covered off a bit about automation, but as a brief reminder, can you remind us all what automation is and what it looks to achieve?
So automation, the point of it is to remove issues that crop up historically through activities that are done manually by people. So, we all make mistakes, we all get things wrong. So automation is repeating a task consistently every time, hopefully with the right outcome, sometimes not so much. So that's what it's there for, really. It's just, as it says, it's automating repetitive tasks.
Yeah, get rid of that human error and just make it quicker, I suppose, to some extent. Frees up people to do other things.
So as mentioned earlier, we've spoken about VMware's automation offerings, but what other tools are out there?
Loads, absolutely loads. But they all do different parts of the automation thing, really. So you've got tools like Puppet and Chef and Ansible. They're like configuration management tools. So let's say you had a Windows server or a Linux server. Inside that server, you want to have a certain set or certain configuration. So you'd use those tools, put them on those servers, and you'd kind of build out your playbooks or your cookbooks if you're using Chef, which is the layout of the programs or the settings of the programs or the settings of Windows or Linux components. And you can use those tools to deploy a new machine and put those on, or you can use it to enforce it. So if you've got developers who are constantly changing things in the server, if you've attached one of these playbooks to the server, you can use one of your configuration management tools to enforce those settings. So if they're turning off the Windows firewall or a Linux firewall or changing ports here and there, use this tool, bring it back into what it should be within your environment. So just keep stuff in line and as it says, manages that configuration. You've got tools like Jenkins. I don't know, Paul, if you've used Jenkins before. If you can speak a bit about that.
Yeah, Jenkins, and there's a few others out there as well that do this continuous integration and continuous delivery. So the idea is that each time you've built some piece of automation, you can have that code automatically built, checked potentially, and then deployed into a test environment or pushed all the way through into production. And really it helps if you've got multiple people working on the same project, delivering pieces of code for as part of a bigger workflow, for example, or a bigger automation piece. There's lots out there, Jenkins, TeamCity, there's a whole bunch of them.
Yep. You've got tools like Selenium, which is for your web-based testing, isn't it, really? So if you've done a website, you can literally record macros in your browser, and if you wanted to play that back using Selenium, and you can just automate your web tests, your web-based testing. So if every time you did a website release, you went through the same process of clicking button X, Y, and Z, making sure you get certain responses, that kind of thing. You can automate all of that as well. So there's tools which can do the whole lot, really.
They can all be integrated with, sort of like the Jenkins and your TeamCity. So you commit some code, and then you can have, historically, in software development, you'd have like unit tests. So, if I send in 1 and 1, does it equal 2? You can test the things. But things, like Selenium, that they can be introduced as well. So they can fire up web browsers and do the kind of user interface testing. So you can get true end-to-end testing done then automatically as well. And we're seeing some of these things being introduced now into automation for infrastructure as a code and other things like that now as well.
Yeah, and coming on to that infrastructure as a code, you've got AWS, so they've got CloudFormation. everything in AWS has like an AMI, like a certain key or a code. You can build all of those things into these templates, these cloud formation templates. And once you build that out, you can literally take that code and paste it into a different environment in AWS. So let's say you built it all out into London and you want the same environment over in Sydney or somewhere, or Tokyo. Take all of that, paste it in, run it, and you're going to get all your servers, all your networks, everything created for you automatically using these templates. So yeah, put a bit of effort into doing that and you can just fire it up anywhere. And that kind of thing is perfect for dev and test environments. So you've got production, you've built out your cloud formation template, you chuck it over into dev and test, and you can just, within, I don't know, however long it takes, you'll have your dev and test environments ready to go. It just makes things a lot quicker. And then I suppose you've got, coming on the infrastructure point of view, you've got guys like HashiCorp that we're looking at the moment. They've got enterprise and open source offerings, but within that you've got tools for provisioning. So you can provision your virtual machines. So they use a tool called Packer, which you can build out, I suppose like a virtual machine template, isn't it? Build out a template and you put your software or your settings on it, and you can pack that machine or package it up to then deploy that to Azure, AWS, your VMware private cloud, everything all through one kind of tool basically. So it reduces that whole effort around having to manually do it. It automates the whole packaging piece. But they've got tools for security, running applications as well. And there's APIs for all of those. So if you've got something like VRO, you can interface with that, and you haven't got to use those tools directly. You can just pull it all through your automation product.
There's tools like that from HashiCorp that are really pushing automation now as well, because previously and historically, you'd have, going back the years of automating a desktop or a server build for Windows, and then maybe one on Linux, you'd have one guy in the organisation who would know how to do a scripted build for Windows and one who could do the Linux. And then you've got people like HashiCorp now, years on, where we're looking to automate things. And, it doesn't matter what the target infrastructure is going to be. As Sam said, you could build out, servers. You can say, I want it to have this much memory, and I want it to have this much CPU and these bits of software. But then you can just say, and I want to land that on AWS, I want to land that on Azure. You don't have to keep recompiling, it does it for you. It allows you to potentially have one automated workflow deploying anywhere. So it may be you want to stand up your production environment or some of it on Azure, for example, but maybe for test and development, you want to mimic that and it's cheaper on AWS. So you can just have one thing that's basically pushing to both. Yeah. So you don't necessarily need that AWS expert and that Azure expert in that instance, as you would have done years ago when it was a Windows guy and a Linux guy automating those. So.
Just need your HashiCorp expert.
Just need your HashiCorp expert, which is us.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned there's a load of tools doing the configuration thing, a load of tools doing the user experience stuff. Where does VRA and VRO sit in that kind of categorization?
I guess that would be more around the front end, I suppose, and from a VRA point of view is more the front end. So people would log in, they would see the VRA portal, and they can request the service they want. VRO is then the interface to all of those services. So you've got VRA connected to VRO, and then VRO connected to whatever you want, Chef, Ansible, AWS, HashiCorp. So VRO is the doer, I suppose, and VRA is the thing that looks pretty for the user.
Yeah.
In simple terms, there is a lot of functionality in VRA, so you can create your blueprints, add in your functions that you need, and obviously there's tight integration with all the VMware services like NSX and that kind of stuff. But yeah, ultimately we use VRO heavily. Yeah. Just because it's so flexible and extensible, we can anything with an API we can talk to, and yeah, that's not one of those marketing lies either. It's literally the case. Anything with an API we can talk to and do something with, and then it's flexible really, and that's how those two come into it really from the way we're using it.
So kind of VRO talks to all the tools and VRA talks to the user. So
pretty much, yeah.
VRA gives you a consumer portal.
Yeah.
Kind of your online shopping screen.
Yeah, or self-service as they call it. So yeah, you can log in, request a server or request whatever you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good.
all these tools, and VRA and VRO, where they all sit in the stack, what's the kind of minimum requirement of infrastructure you need to get started with automation?
Depends what you're trying to automate, ultimately. You've got automation tools and solutions and frameworks that will help you deploy an infrastructure. So, at a minimum, you might have a couple of boxes sitting somewhere that's running some tooling that's going to deploy a whole infrastructure for you, or enough infrastructure to get started. And then once that's built, you may have another automation tool that's going to deploy your guest operating systems, your server operating systems inside of that. You might have another one that's then going to put the applications in it. And ultimately, as you build through that stack and you create it, and you can link them all together with something else. So it really depends on what part you want to automate.
Yeah.
If you've got an existing infrastructure, then you're looking at things maybe like Puppet or VRA, VRO. If you've got nothing, you're starting from scratch, and you're thinking about how am I going to deploy ESX servers, physical, Windows, Linux boxes on bare metal. Then there's other things like Razor by Puppet Labs that's there for that can then tie into Puppet and Ansible and other things later on as well. So there's definitely an automation tool for every
step
bit of the
journey.
stack. Yeah. It really depends on where you want to start, but there's definitely something out there for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're comfortable, I suppose, using Windows or Linux, you haven't not necessarily got to look at another tool like Razor, like Paul said, or one of the HashiCorp tools. You can use PowerShell or Bash. So let's say you're deploying a Windows box and you're changing all these settings every time you log in to deploy it for a user. You can script all that in PowerShell.
Yeah.
And so you deploy your Windows box and then you copy in your PowerShell script to do the settings you want. That is automation.
Yeah.
Really. So you can start at tools like PowerShell and Bash. From a VMware point of view, you've got PowerCLI. So it's a module or a plugin which goes into PowerShell, and it helps you automate some of the VMware functions. So you can deploy a new host, or you can add a new host into vCenter using PowerCLI. You can add new data stores, that kind of stuff. That's all automation. If you can create a script from it and just run that script over and over, you're automating something. It can be as simple as that, really.
And we did a Tech Focus episode a little while back with John Med, the creator of the Power VRA module. I believe that's along the same lines, where you're essentially automating a little bit of VRA using PowerShell.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I think I've not really looked into John's tool, but I think it exposes certain elements from VRA into PowerCLI or PowerShell, like you said. And yeah, you can obviously then create a script around that to do things in a repeatable process.
Beautiful. So you guys are overseeing projects end to end, and I'm guessing no two projects are ever going to be the same, but what are the challenges that you have to overcome most often?
The goals are different. So projects might be trying to achieve the same thing. So they might want to achieve the goal of automating server deployments, but the goals behind that are different. Obviously, every company is going to have different processes. So company A is going to do it this way, company B is going to do it this way. Yeah, they are different. And then but behind the scenes, the way we're developing is we split our workflows into small actions, don't we? So we can take all these smaller pieces of code, and the way we work it is you can, in theory, drag and drop all these small pieces of code. So the goals are different there, but the outcome is kind of the same. So we can use the way we've developed to our advantage by pulling in these little bits and achieving the same outcome. But challenge-wise, I guess it can be things down to companies not even knowing their process. I finished a project recently where I had 3 guys in the room and we whiteboarded the process they wanted to automate, which was deploying a virtual machine. 3 guys in the room. I think 2 were in the same department, 1 was in a different department. Every single one of them gave a different view on the process. So when you're then trying to whiteboard, it makes it more of a challenge because no one actually knows what they need to do to get the goal, to get the outcome. So yeah, that's a challenge, is getting people to think about the actual process. And I suppose how we do that is we pull out the success criteria, don't we? So we kind of look at what the workflow needs to do throughout the workflow to make it a full success. So that could be create the server, set the memory and CPU, turn the server on. That's your 3 success criteria. All of those need to succeed for the whole workflow to succeed and be complete. And then we look at the inputs, the outputs, that kind of stuff. That is a challenge, is getting that information out of them, because they've not had to think about it in that way before.
And quite often as well, it's seen as like a technical project inside the customer. Yeah. So you kind of get there, and on day one, they're kind of, okay, so we need to deploy virtual machines, and we're going to have this much memory and that much CPU, etc., or these apps. And really the first kind of question, that we want to ask is, how do you do it now? If it's manually, do you have change control processes? Things like that you need to go through. Where does the automation sit in the business process? And I think there's an expectancy that obviously it's going to be a technical conversation, so you often don't necessarily have the right people in the room, or as Sam says, you have people with differing views because they're down working in the weeds in the technical part of it. They're not aware of the business process on top, so that can be quite challenging as well. Because ultimately, you can automate anything, but if you're not actually automating the business process successfully, then it doesn't matter if the workflow succeeds or fails, it doesn't work for the business. So we spend quite a lot of time, as Sam said, workshopping up front and asking a lot of questions and making sure that the success criteria are absolutely spot on for what the business requires, not just necessarily the technical guy who's in the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a case of being strict about it as well, isn't it? So if we were talking about deploying a server, we focus on that. Like we don't deviate. So if they kind of give you a success criteria which really doesn't fit into that workflow, we don't care about it. We make note of it, but ultimately that's going to be a different workflow, because if you think about every single thing that has to happen and whatever, I don't think you'll ever get anything automated. You kind of need to be strict about what you're trying to do. There's no harm in breaking things up into a smaller chunk.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that makes you more flexible. So then you can use that little segment here in a different workflow, rather than if you built the workflow to include everything, you're going to be stuck in the future, because if you change this, you have no idea what it's going to do.
Yeah, going to have a knock-on effect in several billion.
Exactly. So it's like, it's a case of being strict about what the process is you're looking at, and focuses on that really. But as well, coming back to what Paul said around the business process or business logic, that is something that stumps people as well, isn't it? So it's one of the projects we've been on is this is their idea was they would log into the portal, and from this selection of servers, choose one of these servers and get whatever outcome they wanted on this server. That's the process. But what they didn't think about on the business point of view is what's controlling the stock of these servers. How do you know what is in stock? How do you know what servers people can choose from? That's all the business logic stuff that is completely forgotten about sometimes. So that's where these workshops come in handy, is because we make you think about what prerequisites there are and what needs to be in place before anything happens. So for a user to be able to choose a server to deploy to, someone needs to do something to keep that stock up to date. So if that server has to meet certain criteria, build that into your business logic, do something which keeps the database live and active really, so it's always ready for the person to consume. Because if not, if you put 10 servers in there and you get 10 people deploying stuff, that's it. That's the end of that workflow. It can't be used anymore because the stock isn't up to date. It's kind of just a dead end before you even start.
What happens when two users, can they pick the same item from stock at the same time? Then you've got two requests of the same thing, and I mean, one of the other things was placement as well. Mm-hmm. If you've got multiple data centers, or you've got multiple pods of resource in a data center, and you want to try and balance deployment of applications or services across them, how do you do that if you've got a user who's just selecting something? And quite commonly they go, well, we'll have a look, we'll log into vCenter or whatever the portal is for whatever tool they're using, see which has got the most resource free, and then put it on there. You don't want your user selecting that kind of stuff. They're just going to see the first thing that's in the drop-down list and use that one. So you're not going to start balancing out these things. And so when we say business logic, it's things like that. And a lot of the time it's just taken for granted because you do it as part of your job and you don't think about it. And some of it's just common sense, but you have to agree the rules that define that to enable you to automate it. So these are the things that don't often get thought about before the engagements start. These are the questions that keep us awake at night.
Yeah. So basically, to wipe out all these challenges further down the line, before you start, you need a set process and you need to have thought out business logic to work out like every possible scenario, which, that sounds really easy.
Well, it's when you're gods like us. It's definitely the phase of the project where you're providing lots of hugs and pats on the back and it will be okay, because it's kind of day one when you pull the pin from the grenade and say, well, we won't be automating anything this week because you need to decide how your business is going to work. Mm-hmm. Is your business process, what you've got there, can it be automated? Is it just a bit of it that can be automated? Is it an opportunity to update the business process? And if you've got a room full of techies, then they're not necessarily the right audience, so it's a challenge.
Yeah, and the biggest difference as well is it's now not always techies that are going to be consuming those workflows.
Yeah.
So, like the example Paul gave on the drop-downs around placement, a techie would be quite happy to choose that placement because they're aware of where it's going and what is behind the scenes. For a user who hasn't got any awareness of the infrastructure, they are going to pick the first thing. So you need to look at those rules and figure out those rules to make it a lot easier for the consumer.
Yeah, if I was doing it, I'd turn to the person next to me, ask them how they did it, and then,
and you don't want that.
Copy and paste.
Yeah, you don't want that in the automation. You want to kind of make things a bit quicker and easier for the person, not create them new challenges. You want to, just streamline the whole thing and reduce that human error by having an option for placement. If everyone places it in location A, you're going to run out of capacity. And that's what you want to avoid with this sort of automation stuff is you never error. Basically, you always kind of get what you want.
Yeah, striving for perfection.
Yeah, exactly. So, but there's a lot of challenges. They are all different. The goals in a project could be the same, but the way they're achieved is ultimately different. From a development point of view, the way we work is really modular, so we can be flexible to whatever those goals are, and we can kind of get the outcome that's needed. So.
I like that you've brought up modular. So, this is going to be one of the hardest ones to answer, but is there kind of an average amount of steps that you might have in a workflow? Is there like an average amount of workflows you'll have per project? I mean, how vast can these things get?
No, it really does depend. I mean, if you took simplistically, like say you had a requirement from a customer to build one workflow to deploy a virtual machine, install some apps and update it, for example, that wouldn't necessarily be one workflow. There could be 3 workflows there doing different things, all linked together, because then you've got some reusability later on. So, we could engage with a customer and they may say, we want 14 workflows to do these things, but we could end up writing 50 because we want them to be able to, reshape and adapt those as the business changes later on. So, you really don't know. No matter how many questions you ask and how hard you try, until you get in there and really look under the bonnet, you're not gonna know.
Yeah. So it's literally how long is a piece of string?
It is how long is a piece of string. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Another example could be creating a new user in Active Directory. So to do that, if you're doing it in the GUI, the minimum stuff you need is like a full name, a username, and a password.
Yeah.
Pretty simple. That you could, if you're lucky enough, you could do that in one call, send all that information in and you get your user. But when you dig into the process, what you realize is that username needs to follow a certain format. So it has to be the first name dot second name. The password, you might never want the user to specify that. So it's got to be automatically generated based on certain criteria. So X number of symbols, uppercase, lowercase. Then it might be a case that the email address needs to end in a certain address, depending on what business unit you're in. So, and then you've got security groups as well. So again, depending on the business unit, they're going to get placed into certain security groups to give them access to certain systems. So that simple process of creating a new user has now, in the process of a 2-hour workshop, actually grown massively in terms of what is actually required behind the scenes. So yeah, as Paul said, you break all that into different smaller workflows. So the password generation, you're going to put that into a smaller action or a smaller workflow because you could use that anywhere.
Yeah.
You could use that in your virtual machine creation. For example, you might create a user by default and you could use that same password thing. Your group addition thing, you can separate that because you might want to update an existing user, not just a new user. So yeah, it is literally how long is a piece of string. It could be anything, and that's the importance of the workshops that we've spoken about a few times. Is it highlights all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It brings all of that stuff out into the light and lets people know what actually needs to go on to get the outcome of a user.
Is it, they think it's just getting from point A, getting to point B, but you know that it's actually getting to point A and B past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
But in it as well, you also need to have error handling. So if you're deploying let's say we're going to create you as a user, you put your full name in, and then we've generated a username. What happens if that already exists?
Yeah.
Do we error the workflow and just simply cancel it, or do we give the user an outcome? And to do that, we simply append like a number 2 at the end of the username, and then the user's still got an outcome. They've still got their user.
Yeah.
But it's just slightly different. But it's all been handled. So error handling is another thing that comes into it. Is do you want that or not?
Yeah.
What happens? Yeah. What happens if?
Conversely, as well, we've got customers that we've dealt with who, like most businesses, the people, they may already have an automation product like VRO, VRA, and they've been tasked with automating things. And because not necessarily through any fault of their own, the time poor, because everyone's busy these days, and we're all expected to deliver more. They, to achieve the goals that they're set, they'll start off with all the low-hanging fruit. So they'll go for the workflows that are defined as being the simplest, and they'll build them out as one long workflow, and they'll keep doing that. And then 3 months down the line, there needs to be some level of flexibility in one of these workflows. And it's then very complex, and they haven't got the bandwidth to look at it. So then, we'll kind of have to go in and really review how they've built these workflows or these automation scripts. And at that point, still hold the workshop, even though the workflow is already there, just to review it, work out what the new requirements are, and then start breaking it down. So that's another thing that we see that's quite common as well.
So your perfect outcome is for the end user to really have no idea that any of this is going on in the background. But as far as steps concerned from the client's initial asking, there is could be any number of points on the stairway to success.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So there is
We don't want the customer, or, in terms of, from our point of view, if there's a portal in front of somebody, then, the best result is that somebody can go to that portal, request using the bare minimum of information required, whatever it is that they need, and then it arrives.
Yeah. So they'll never see the amount of steps, but the client will ever ask for that number of steps at the beginning?
They try and ask for sort of the effort, don't they, involved, but really until you've done one of these workshops, it's hard to put a definite number on it.
Yeah.
You can kind of give it a t-shirt size to some extent. So let's say someone does want a new user or a new virtual machine, you can kind of put it in the small t-shirt size. So we reckon it's going to take X number of days to do all of these things, development, workshops, integration, testing and stuff. But yeah, ultimately, until the workshops are done, you don't know their process. You don't know what's actually involved. So yeah, it's hard to put a number on it straight away, but you can kind of, from an experience point of view, put a number against it from what you've seen previously. So I guess you can, from a consultancy point of view, caveat that to some extent and say, this is what's going to happen in this workflow.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, as well, conversation starts around a workflow, and what was, deploy a virtual machine becomes deploy a virtual machine with this app or that app to here, to there, with these settings, with that. And the more people you've got in the room, the more ideas you get showered with, and you've got to try and keep them on track. So,
So, like in these workshops, what kind of questions should a CTO be asking themselves to scope an automation project? What things might they be missing?
I think probably the first question is why. Why do you want to automate anything? Like, why are you doing it? Is it a driver for efficiency? Is it consolidating, operations teams into smaller teams, or there's multiple reasons for doing it. It's quite important to understand that. And I think as well, quite often there's a lack of understanding that when something's been automated, if we've gone in and we've written some workflows and we've handed it over, whoever we're handing it over to, they need to have skills in that automation product as well. It's not do it once and forget it. You still need to maintain these things. So I think, why are you doing it and how are you going to maintain it and what's the benefit going to be over 2, 3, 5 years, however you want to count it, not just the immediate term, but what's the longer term view? There's a lot of automation products out there, as we said, and you really need to think about these things. You can get tied into one or another that may not fit where the business is going in the next 2, 3 years. Just get a helicopter view of what you want, really, I guess, and then look down on it all and build out your roadmap pretty much like any other project.
So the future is everything going to be automated? Can every process be automated, or more importantly, should every process be automated? Where do we draw the line? I mean, is Skynet the limit?
I don't know. We were having a conversation the other day, actually, weren't we, around the Google and the restaurant, phoning up the restaurant to make the restaurant appointment. So some Google Assistant on some Android phone. The guy added a reminder into Google and said, can you phone up this restaurant and book a reservation for this date at 2 p.m? Yeah. And his phone called the restaurant to have a conversation with the restaurant to book this appointment. But it wasn't the guy phoning, it was the Android Assistant. And if you listen to this conversation, it sounds exactly like a person. The person was asking, the restaurant booking person was asking questions to the Android Assistant, and the Android Assistant was working out what to reply with. And it was scary to see it because that conversation was so kind of smooth and fluid. Yeah. That I don't know. You could automate everything, but do you? Like you said, do you or should you automate it? It's kind of automation is awesome, but I don't think everything needs it. I don't think you need to boil a kettle in the morning automatically because you still got to go down there and pour it out anyway. So yeah, some things are pointless, but I don't know. I think it would all change to some extent.
I think there's things as well that need a personal touch. You still want to talk to a person. How many times over the years have you rung your bank or somebody and it's the automated telephony service? Yeah. Press 1 for this and you're left in telephony hell. Yeah. And you can't talk to a real person. Yet for some reason, what would be a common request of information from you isn't covered by the automated system, and you get frustrated and, there's a time and place to automate. If it's going to give you increased efficiency, if it's going to save you money, if it's repetitive tasks, that's a great use case for it. You can point people at a different task and make them, look into things, maybe more strategic things for your business. So yeah, definitely time and place. One thing's for sure, we never want to automate our jobs because we like our jobs.
Automate the automators.
Automate the automators, that would not be good. Yeah.
It's making a joke about the automating the automators. There are tools and software we use to take a piece of code and transform it into a different piece of code for a different system. Yeah. That, to some extent, is doing a lot of the work that we would normally have to manually do.
So automation's already infringing on your jobs, is what you're saying.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Anything you guys would like to add about automation?
I guess as a final point, I just think about your processes, including your business logic. Think about that whole thing needs to be thought about before you look at doing your automation, really. You need to be prepared as a business to go at it. If you try and just do stuff really piecemeal, I don't think you're going to get anywhere. Get us in to do these workshops, get us to help you, and just kind of go from there, really.
Yeah, Sam says, think about it from a business point of view. If you're an operator of an environment, if your role is technical and you can automate things you do, that's great because efficiency goes up. But if you can get somebody higher up the chain in the business, a C-level person thinking about it and looking across and then down, there's a lot more things that can be automated, a lot more things that can be integrated with, and the whole business will benefit. So think about it from the top down.
Brilliant. Well, guys, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you titans of automation. If anyone else would like to get in contact with you, possibly ask you some questions, would they be able to?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
They can talk to the automated version of Sam or the automated version of me.
Yeah, you can talk to my AI assistant, that's fine, yeah. Yeah, Twitter, which is Sam_Perrin, or through my Xtravirt email address. which is sam.perrin@Xtravirt.com.
Mr. Davey, are you happy to?
Yeah, via email is best. So paul.davey@Xtravirt.com.
Perfect. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Cloud Insiders. To find out more and to listen to additional episodes, go to cloudinsiders.fm. You can follow us on Twitter @Cloud Insiders and subscribe on iTunes. Catch you next time.